The 2026 Stealth 16 is MSI's first real thin and light gaming laptop, and it's pretty impressive. But it is directly aiming at the Asus Zephyrus G16, which has been around and perfected for a number of years now. But the Stealth has one major advantage over the Zephyrus that might make it the better choice. So which one of them should you buy? Let's find out. And please like and subscribe if you like these type of videos. From the outside, they're both trying to look as stealthy as possible, get it? But there's a higher chance that the Stealth could be mistaken for a MacBook since it doesn't have any LEDs on the back. While they both technically have a fully aluminum body, they are not created equally. While the Stealth definitely creaks and rattles a bit, the Zephyrus feels like a tank from every single side. From the inside as well, the Zephyrus just feels more sturdy and premium. And the edges of the Zephyrus's panels line up a lot more smoothly as well, while the Stealth has some sharper corners on the bottom. They are almost the exact same weight though, so both are very comfortable to carry around and are usable with one hand. But the Zephyrus is definitely thinner. We'll have to see if that actually impacts cooling though. From the inside, these are both beasts, and I was able to spec them almost the exact same, which should make this comparison a whole lot clearer when it comes to performance. And right away we see that the Zephyrus has way higher power limits for that 5080, which should make it considerably faster. The Zephyrus also has a higher 5090 spec, while this 5080 model is the highest tier GPU that the Stealth comes with. For their I/O, they both have an awesome port selection, with plenty of options. But the Zephyrus goes for a full-size SD card slot, while the Stealth has an Ethernet jack, which is pretty rare for these thinner laptops. However, the Stealth has most of its bulky ports on the right side of the laptop, which might hinder mouse movement, while the Zephyrus puts almost everything on the left side, which I think is a little better. The Zephyrus has a slightly higher wattage power brick, but the size of the bricks themselves are basically identical. But they can both use smaller bricks for emergencies, since they support USB-C charging up to 100 watts. Now let's look at their keyboards. They both go for a very MacBook-like look, with a keyboard in the middle and two big speaker grills on the sides. They both have keyboard lighting, but the Zephyrus has a single zone RGB backlight, while the Stealth actually has 4 zones, which does look a little better. But the clear plastic on the side of the Stealth keys look a little tacky compared to the Zephyrus in my opinion. Now here's how they type. They're both quite nice to type on. They both have long enough key travel and are nice and thumpy, but the Stealth keys are definitely made of a cheaper feeling plastic. The Zephyrus just feels a bit more premium. And it also has some reprogrammable macro keys at the top here, while the Stealth does not. Moving down, we have their trackpads. And the Stealth is slightly bigger, but they are both absolutely massive. And they're both made of glass. But the Zephyrus feels a lot more premium here. The Stealth just rattles a lot when you tap or click on it. And the same goes for their clicks. The Zephyrus's trackpad and body just feel higher quality. Moving up, we have their displays. And these are very similar panels, and both are incredibly high quality. The Stealth is actually using the same Samsung panel that last year's Zephyrus G16 had, which was really good. They're both equally gorgeous OLED panels, so colors are just as pretty and blacks are just as black. They have the same refresh rate and response times in games, meaning even competitive titles are about as smooth as they can get. And the resolution is also the same, so pixels are not going to be visible. But this year's Zephyrus got a huge bump in peak brightness, which does make it better for outdoor use as well. And while they have the same top-tier anti-reflective layers, that extra brightness on the Zephyrus gives it a slight edge to reducing reflections, although they're both great. The Zephyrus does open up a little further, but they both don't go back super far. And they have equally high quality hinges, although I think the Zephyrus actually wobbles a bit less. But now comes my favorite part, their speakers. The Zephyrus G16 has had the best speakers in any Windows laptop for the past 2 years now. And since the Stealth is essentially a response to the Zephyrus' success, and since they added those massive speaker grills, can it beat the Zephyrus? Well, while it definitely sounds good, the Zephyrus is still a lot better. They both have dedicated subwoofers on the bottom and 2 big speaker drivers on the top, but the Zephyrus gets a lot louder, it has way deeper bass, it sounds a bit more clear, it has actual surround sound, and overall it just sounds better. Don't get me wrong, the Stealth definitely sounds good, but when you're comparing it to the Zephyrus, good is just not enough. The Zephyrus definitely has a better sounding microphone, but their webcams look pretty similar. The Zephyrus has slightly better colors, while the Stealth may look a little sharper. An extra on the Stealth though is that it has a physical webcam switch, while the Zephyrus is not Gunnar approved. But on a gaming laptop, performance means almost everything. And while they have the exact same specs, the Zephyrus just has higher wattages. So is it faster? Well, in Cinebench R23, it's not. They have the same processors with the same power limits, so they perform the exact same in both single and multi-core scores. But in 3D Mark TimeSpy, we can definitely see that those higher wattages on the Zephyrus 5080 make it perform considerably better, almost on par with some way thicker laptops. But benchmarks don't really show you real-world performance, where both the CPU and GPU are working hard at the same time. And these are gaming laptops after all, so let's see how they perform in some actual games. And as you saw, they perform very similar to each other. In the Oblivion Remastered and Counter-Strike, the Zephyrus was noticeably faster. But in basically every other title, the difference was so small that we can say they perform essentially identical. I mean, they do have the exact same specs, but I thought the higher wattage on the Zephyrus 5080 would have made a bigger impact. Because that 5080 in the Zephyrus does run at a noticeably higher wattage than the Stealth. 20 to 30 watts is no small amount for a laptop GPU. But I guess it didn't matter that much for gaming, which is actually really impressive for the Stealth. Either way, both of these laptops are gonna run any game application or basically anything you throw at them. But performance is not everything. Lots of power means lots of heat, so which one of these two is cooled better? Well, the Zephyrus G16 stays about 5 degrees below the thermal limits of both the CPU and GPU in heavy games, but the Stealth basically always reaches its thermal limit in heavy games, both for the CPU and GPU. I didn't see any noticeable throttling in games or benchmarks, so this thing is simply pushing itself to its limits. The simple fact is that the Stealth does not have a vapor chamber, while the Zephyrus does, which massively helps with cooling. And that's basically the entire reason for why it can push so much more power out of that 5080. But which one is louder? Well, the Zephyrus definitely makes more noise. You can of course make the fans run faster on the Stealth as well, but for my testing that didn't do super much for the cooling. The only way you can make it cooler is by propping it up or by dropping its performance profile. But that also massively lowers its GPU wattage, so I wouldn't recommend that for gaming. So despite the Stealth being the thicker laptop, the Zephyrus definitely has the better cooling system. They are both completely silent during normal, lighter use though, which is nice. But what about battery life? Because these two laptops have the same processor, the same display, and the same size battery, so they should last just as long, right? Well, I compared their battery life in two different scenarios, under light use and during gaming. In the light use test, I played a YouTube video until both their batteries died, with their displays at 80% brightness, at 60 Hz, and with their dedicated GPUs turned off. And the Zephyrus lasted almost double as long, getting up to 17 hours of battery life. Since they have all of these things in common, they should really be getting almost identical numbers. But the Stealth just uses more power on battery, I guess. So in normal, heavier use, you're probably gonna get a lot more out of the Zephyrus as well. Now in the gaming test, I played Minecraft until their batteries died, with the same settings as before. But here, they do basically last the same amount of time, which is what should happen. I have a feeling that the Stealth's processor is doing some weird stuff with the low power efficiency core allocation. Because apparently in heavier workloads, we are getting the same numbers like we expected. Alright, let's move on. The Stealth is a little thicker, but thickness does have its benefits. Because it is definitely more upgradable than the Zephyrus. While the G16 has fully soldered RAM, like most thinner laptops these days, the Stealth actually has fully upgradable memory, meaning you can stack this thing with up to 128 GB of RAM. If you can afford it. They both have two M.2 SSD slots, which is very nice for easily upgradable RAM, and they also both have Wi-Fi card slots, although Wi-Fi 7 should be good enough for a long time. But now comes the most important part of the video: what do they cost? Well, the Zephyrus G16 with an RTX 5080 is very, very expensive, since it released at the peak of the RAM crisis. But so did the Stealth, and with that same 5080 spec, it's also very, very expensive. But they do have cheaper models that are definitely a lot more worth it in my opinion. And while the Zephyrus with a 5070 Ti is still very expensive, the Stealth is quite a bit cheaper, and at 3,000 bucks, it's almost priced like a laptop from last year. In Europe though, while the Zephyrus is still ridiculously expensive, even for that 5070 Ti spec, here the Stealth is more than 1,000 bucks cheaper. So it has way more value than in America, and I'd actually say it is priced well. I'll put links for all of these in the description down below for if you're interested. So let's get to a conclusion here. Which one of these should you buy? The Zephyrus G16 or the Stealth 16? Well, here's a very simple and fast answer. If you want to save money, get the Stealth 16. But if you want to get the best of the best, get the Zephyrus G16. The Zephyrus has a brighter display, it has better speakers, definitely better build quality, and it performs slightly better, but only in some titles. Meanwhile, the Stealth is simply a lot cheaper, and it has upgradable RAM, which might be a massive plus for some people. But it also has some thermal issues. It doesn't run very cool. So the Stealth is essentially just a cheaper Zephyrus G16, and it performs almost the exact same, which is great competition. But there is actually a third option that is way more worth it than either one of these. Last year's Zephyrus G14 and G16. Last year's 5070 G16 is, no joke, $1,500 cheaper. And if we compare that to a 5060 G14, well, that's a completely different price class of gaming laptops. These new models have just inflated in price way too much due to the ongoing RAM crisis. So last year's models, which also still have last year's pricing, are just a lot more worth it. However, the Stealth is priced very well in my opinion, so I would definitely say it's worth it. And that's about it for today. I'll see you all in the next video. Bye bye.
Which of these vehicles can survive an instant acceleration of 342,789,321 miles per hour? Tank.
The last one is
Plane. A red car.